Welcome to the final video of Part 5. We've built up from what a report is, through the standards, and across the whole EU rulebook. Now we reach Part D, ESG ratings. And in some ways, this is where all the tensions of the chapter come to a head. Ratings are supposed to be the convenient shortcut. Someone else reads all those reports and hands you a single score. But as we'll see, that shortcut is far shakier than most users realize. Let's find out why. Quick aside, enjoying this so far? Then consider subscribing so you stay in the loop as new episodes are released. Start with the market. An ESG rating scores a company's exposure to and management of ESG issues. And these scores are used everywhere, by investors picking stocks, by index providers building ESG indices, and by lenders pricing loans. The market has consolidated around a handful of large providers. MSCI ESG, Sustainalytics, now owned by Morningstar, S&P Global, Moody's, which absorbed the former V.E, LSEG, formerly Refinitiv, and ISSESG. Notice the pattern. Most of the big data and index houses now own at least one ESG rating business. Ratings have become a strategic asset, tucked inside the giants of financial information. That concentration matters, because it means a small number of methodologies quietly shape where enormous sums of capital flow. To make it tangible, here's a sampler of the ratings you'll actually encounter. The Bloomberg ESG Disclosure Score. The CDP scores on climate, water, and forests. FTSE Russell's ESG ratings and the ISS ESG suite. MSCI's ESG ratings. S&P Global's Corporate Sustainability Assessment, the CSA, the CSA, which underlies the well-known Dow Jones Sustainability Indices, and Sustainalytics ESG Risk Ratings, alongside LSEG's ESG scores, formerly the Thomson Reuters or Asset Force scores. Don't worry about memorizing the list. The point to absorb is how many there are, and how different their origins, names, and methods are. Each is a different lens, and as we're about to see, those lenses do not agree. So what do these instruments actually measure? First, a clarification. Third-party CSR measures aren't all the same kind of thing. They come as indexes, as rankings, and as ratings, with different methods and different goals. Diaz-Canamero and co-authors in 2020 give a comprehensive categorization of all these instruments if you want the full taxonomy. But for our purposes, focus on the three design choices that shape any rating whatsoever. One, which attributes does it include? That's the scope. Two, how is each attribute actually measured? That's the choice of indicators. And three, how are those attributes combined into a single score? That's the weighting or aggregation. Scope, measurement, weight. Hold on to those three words, because the next slide shows that they are precisely where the raters part ways. This is the pivotal slide of the video. Baerk, Kolbel, and Rigobon, in a 2022 paper aptly titled Aggregate Confusion, decompose rater disagreement into exactly those three sources. Scope divergence. Ratings cover different sets of attributes. One might include corporate lobbying, another ignores it entirely. Measurement divergence. The same attribute is captured with different indicators. Labor practices measured through staff turnover by one rater, through court cases by another. And weight divergence, raters simply assign different importance to the attributes they share. Now the headline number, and it's a shocker. The average correlation across the major raters is only around 0.54. For comparison, credit ratings from the big agencies correlate above 99%. And the largest single source of the disagreement is measurement, at 56%, followed by scope at 38%, with weight a modest 6%. So the raters mostly disagree not about what matters, but about what the facts even are. Let's see that visually. This matrix shows the pairwise correlations between the major ESG raters, every rater compared with every other. And the striking thing is how far below 1 these numbers sit. If the raters were all measuring the same underlying reality, these correlations would cluster near 1, the way credit ratings do. Instead, the way credit ratings do. Instead, they scatter around that 0.54 average. Read this chart as a picture of genuine disagreement. Pick two respected agencies at random, and they agree only about half the time. For anyone who assumed an ESG score was an objective fact, this should be unsettling. Here's the mechanism behind that disagreement, made concrete. This shows how different raters use different indicators to capture the very same underlying category. Take a category everyone agrees is important, say employee well-being. One rater proxies it with one set of measurable signals. Another picks a completely different set. They're aiming at the same target with different instruments. And so they hit different points. This is measurement divergence in action, the single biggest driver of the overall disagreement. It's not that one rater is lazy and another diligent. It's that there's no agreed way to turn a fuzzy concept like good governance into a number. And it goes deeper still. You might hope that even if the headline scores diverge, the raters at least agree at the level of individual categories, that they'd concur on which firms are good on water, even if they weight water differently. This slide dashes that hope. The correlations even at the level of individual ESG categories remain low. So the disagreement isn't just about how the pieces are weighted together at the end, it reaches down into the assessment of each specific issue. This is why divergence is so stubborn. It's not a surface-level aggregation quirk you could fix with a tweak. It's baked in, category by category all the way down. If ratings disagree across raters, are they at least stable within a single rater over time? Here's a disquieting finding from Bayerk, Fabisic, and Zautner. In a 2021 paper with the pointed title, "Is History Repeating Itself?" They document that ESG scores change sharply over short spans, and remarkably, partly because of the retroactive rewriting of history. When a provider revises its methodology, it doesn't just change today's scores. It goes back and rewrites the past scores too. That means a study run last year and the same study rerun today on the very same historical period can reach different conclusions because the historical data itself has silently shifted underneath. For empirical research that relies on these scores, that's a serious problem. The ground keeps moving. Why does all of this matter in practice? Trace the consequences through three groups. For investors, two portfolios, both labeled ESG, can look wildly different depending on which rating they were built from. The label guarantees far less than you'd think. For researchers, empirical findings on the ESG and performance link turn out to be sensitive to which rating you happen to use. A lot of the contradictory results in the literature are really just rating noise. And for firms, mixed signals blunt the incentive to improve because it becomes genuinely unclear what good even means when the raters can't agree. And recall the deeper question from video 1. Do ratings and reports even reach the same conclusion? Often they don't, as Skelet and Kelly and Sadawi and Subaroyan both document. Is there any force that pushes rating quality up? Here's an encouraging study. Chun, Duber, and Frojmovic, 2025. They use a clever natural experiment. The entry of Sustainalytics into the market in 2010 treated as a competition shock to the incumbent raters. And they find something heartening. For the firms newly covered by Sustainalytics, the incumbents' ratings got better. They began to predict future negative ESG news more strongly, a sign of higher quality, and they evaluated more difficult to measure outcome metrics, a sign of more effort. In other words, competition acts as an implicit disciplining mechanism. When a rival shows up and starts watching the same companies, the incumbents raise their game. It suggests the divergence problem, while real, is not hopeless. Market pressure can nudge quality upward. Now a real-world cautionary tale that pulls together greenwashing and ratings, the DWS case. DWS is the asset management arm of Deutsche Bank. In 2022, its offices were raided by authorities over allegations of greenwashing. essentially of claiming its greenwashing, essentially of claiming its funds were more sustainable than they actually were. The affair later ended in a settlement with the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, in 2023. This case sent a genuine shock through the industry because it showed that greenwashing is not just an abstract worry. It can bring regulators and criminal investigators to your door. It's the concrete embodiment of everything we've discussed: fuzzy definitions, unreliable labels, and the growing determination of regulators to hold the financial sector to its sustainability claims. Which brings us to the regulatory response and a striking gap it fills. For years, ESG rating providers themselves were essentially unregulated, despite their enormous influence over where capital flows. The credit rating agencies had been regulated after the financial crisis. The ESG raters had not. That's now changing. The EU ESG now changing. The EU ESG rating regulation, Regulation 2024-3005, was adopted in late 2024. Under it, ESG rating providers must be authorized and supervised by ESMA. They must be transparent about their methodologies and data sources, and they must manage their conflicts of interest. For instance, separating the rating business from consulting, audit, and benchmark activities. It applies from mid-2026, and it's a major step toward ratings that are comparable and trustworthy. Regulation is finally catching up with the raters. Let's gather the key takeaways of the whole chapter. First, sustainability reporting has gone mainstream, and in the EU, largely mandatory. Second, materiality, and especially the EU's double materiality, decides what actually gets reported. Third, the standards are converging. The ISSB as the global financial materiality baseline, the ESRS as the EU's double materiality regime, and the GRI holding the impact tradition. Fourth, reporting is necessary but not sufficient. Assurance, comparability, and the hard truth that reporting is not the same as progress all remain open issues. And fifth, ESG ratings diverge systematically, and new EU rules now target their transparency and the greenwashing they can enable. That's the arc of Part 5, from foundations to ratings. The full list of references for this session is on screen and in the video description, beginning here with the academic literature, including Bayerk and co-authors Chatterjee, Chun, and Diaz-Canamero. The academic references continue: Kruger, Zotner, Tang and Yong, Locke and Seal, Pucker, Sadawi and Subaroyan, and Scalay and Kelly. Here you'll find Pucker, Sadawi and Subaroyan, and Scalay and Kelly. Here you'll find the EU legislation we've discussed, the taxonomy, the SFDR, the NFRD and CSRD, the CSDDD, the Stop the Clock and Omnibus reforms, the ESG rating regulation, and the ESMA fund name guidelines. And finally, the standards, frameworks, and data sources. The ISSB's IFRSS1 and S2, the GRI standards, the TCFD recommendations, the UN SDGs, the PRI, Roncalli's lecture notes, and the practitioner surveys. All of these are in the description if you'd like to read further. Let's close out Part 5. We began with the foundations of reporting and Pucker's 5 problems. We surveyed the voluntary standards. We crossed the whole EU framework, the CSRD and ESRS, the taxonomy, the SFDR, the CSRD and ESRS, the taxonomy, the SFDR, the CSDDD, and the omnibus reshaping it all. And we ended in the contested world of ESG ratings, where the raters agree only about half the time, where measurement is the deepest source of the disagreement, and where the DWS case and the new EU rating regulation show both the risks and the response. The overarching lesson: transparency is essential, but it is only ever the beginning. The numbers must be reliable, comparable, and honestly used. That completes our chapter on reporting and ratings. In the next part of the course, we build on this foundation and turn to sustainable banking, how these disclosure and rating systems play out inside financial institutions themselves. Thank you, and I'll see you in Part 6. That's where we'll stop. Thank you for your time today, and if you enjoyed it, subscribing is the best way to keep the series going for you. And as a parting thought, if finance and sustainability are your thing, consider studying with us in Leipzig. Our undergraduate and graduate programs are open to international students in one of Germany's most vibrant cities.